conforming to the sustainability? Are we fully conforming to the sustainability principle? We ended the class with some very cogent questions. We have two opposing views. We need ecological sustainability. We need economic growth. Individual countries need to decide, looking at all factors, the principle, a holistic picture and for themselves what they want. Said a study in the year 2006 decline in global footprint due to population growth, and then back in 1999, ecological sustainability must improve as a where would we be if you are a policy? So the idea is to look at this from 2 points of view. I want economic growth. I also need to think about the environment. Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, can we mute everyone else, please? Can we mute?
Please, your mics are muted, please.
Prof, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. So as I was saying, how fully do we conform to the sustainability principles as a people within our country? How much economic growth are we willing to embark on and say, okay, we're also willing to meet ecological sustainability? There are different theories, but my thinking or my opinion is that we should be armed with the facts of the issues, but take decisions that we think are best for our people. The best decisions the country like the kingdom will take might be the best decision a country in the developing world will take. And typical example we will give is in the 70s and 80s, we used to do lots of work with Julius Berger and many of these companies from Europe and the US and so on. But of recent, we've focused on China and other Asian countries because they put much of us on things like this because they think we're far behind to be building in all this pollution control of that, and they would always blame the West for most of the damage to the should be most people in the third world and so, rising capitalist countries are so keen on following this to the end. It's up to us, a personal opinion. But it's not enough to say, yeah, there's conspiracy theory. Arm yourself with the knowledge and decide what you think is best. But don't have the knowledge. You might be playing a role that will affect your future children and generations. Polluter principle, polluter pays principle. We introduced it as one of the 6 principles initially, where the polluter gets to pay for all the environmental problems they may cause. And we can bring it down to the lowest level. A few years ago, I think over 15, 16 years ago, I was rushing out of my house when I was studying. And instead of dropping the garbage I took from the house into the bin, I was rushing so fast and I dropped it. Somehow, those who were coming to clean take our waste realized that I didn't drop it where I was meant to. And by the time I came back, I saw a bill of £60 for me to pay. So if you cause a problem, you should pay a fine for it. That's at the individual level. Many societies, developed societies have done that. If you fish in a place that you are not meant to fish, you pay very heavy fines. So polluters can only be made to pay if all environmental problems they cause have been identified. So we need to find out what environmental problems that these people are meant to solve. I think sometime last year, we had this ethanol company in Makodi disposing their effluents into the River Benue. Of course, some people who went hiking saw it raised and there were issues. I don't know how that was finally sorted. But in other developed countries, you would lose a huge amount of your profit. You know what you are meant to pay for not doing that. Over time, what's understood to a population has changed. It used to be narrow, now it's way broader. In 1970s, waste products released into water and air was a process and product-based definition. However, an outcome-based definition is now talking of what is your damage to species and natural habitats. So for that internal company, for example, you say, oh, you have just brought in your waste that you're meant to do and you didn't dispose it well. So for that, you pay for this product. But in the developed world, if a company does something like that, they will measure the impact of that waste on the river, the damage to the species, the damage to the damage to water, damage to land, contamination, and those fees are usually huge. So most people, if a pollution is made to pay for something, they'll be conscious of what effect that can have on economic progress as a company. Who is a polluter? It's not always around who related to pollution. For example, where you have a diffuse pollution, but it's important that we look at how it has evolved in terms of defining who a polluter is. So in the early days, we have a polluter as someone who directly or indirectly damages the environment or who creates conditions leading to damage. Of recent, we are now extending it to people who might, in the future, directly or indirectly damage the environment. So, for example, if you're in a place of policy and you take a decision that will affect the future generation, you can be called a polluter, even if the effect has not happened yet. In practices, identifying culprits is not easy because there are multiple sources of pollution who along the supply chain does more harm. So in the past, companies polluted environments with no concern for cost of dealing with it. Described as externalities are not accounted for in the company accounts. The objective for the pollution principle is to get polluters to limit their pollution and bear the cost of doing this. So the company would look at it and say, okay, if I am releasing this into the environment and this is the fine I am meant to pay, I will have to decide whether it is worth it. Some companies can choose to do it if they realize that whatever they will be benefiting from it far outweighs the technology would need to stop the pollution. So those are things you need to look at. The polluter pays principle, it forces companies to pay to prevent pollutant release or pay for remediation. We had Shell in the UNEP report in Ogoniland, expected to do billions of dollars to those communities for the effect they had on their livelihoods, on their lands, on their rivers, and on even the social aspects of what has happened over the years. I don't think Shell would care because they've made so much money. But if we make it way, way steeper, companies will think twice because they would need to pay for pollutant release from their organizations. What the polluter pays principle does not do is to provide subsidies to polluters not to pollute, and it allows polluters to pay to pollute. So we probably need to put beyond that for willing to go fully into having to protect the environment. The earliest standard forms of payment was transferring profits from products to government to offset costs, since government is actually involved directly in pollution control. So they pay for pollution control equipment, they pay for pollution removal infrastructure and services. They also pay for measurements, surveillance, supervisions, and inspections. One of the weaknesses with this version is that it's actually ineffective in stopping pollution because you are just telling the person, if you pollute, you pay this. So the person can as well just decide, I will pollute and pay. How does that really help the environment? Different countries set different standards of levy. So it depends on how much you think you are willing to go all the way or maybe milder with this. And the broader perspective, it also makes the polluter liable for the cost of cleanup. So most polluters are likely to invest in pollution prevention because they don't want to risk the punishments that would come to them. The primary benefit is that polluters are forced to pay for remediation of pollution they cause. So polluters therefore invest in pollution prevention measures to avoid the above. Cost of this investment are passed on to consumers. So at the end of the day, if I produce something and it will cost me 20 naira, and at the end of the day, I am going to pay a fine of maybe 2 naira or 4 naira, what the person would instead do is make sure the cost of that thing is higher so that the consumer also pays for it. And that also has an effect on our economy as well. In terms of more efficient to him. So the consumer now needs to change mindset to say, okay, because costing me so much to use these company products, I would not use that product as much. And with that, the company also probably reduces their number in terms of production. Polluters reduce pollution more efficiently than blunt instrument of regulation. So at the end of the day, my thoughts would be many companies will put a lot of money into R&D, more technology advances to see how in the long run they don't have to pay those fines. How do governments make producers to pay? One is by regulations. You constrain what polluters can discharge into the environment. You force them to fund pollution control equipment and measures. We have NESRA as a body that is one of them responsible for pollution control. and all of that. Government also levies and taxes these companies for the incurred costs of protecting the environment, like sewage treatment plants and all of that. So if you are producing something that is harmful, typically an environmental sewage treatment plant might not be equipped to handle your sorts of pollutants. But because you are doing that, you are taxed more. You are giving maybe an environmental levy to pay so that government can invest in those sort of plants. So you are making polluters liable or legally for any damage that they cause. A guiding principle of environmental policies routine is as a way of life. It's allocating cost of pollution prevention and control measures to encourage rational use of scarce environmental resources and avoid distortion in international trade and investment. So it's basically a principle of environmental policy. So we look at how we can allocate costs to preventing pollution and control measures so that we use our scarce environmental resources and avoid the problems we have in trade. The first adopter was the European Community Action Program on the Environment in 1973, and it has featured in all the European Union environmental legislation since then. We also have the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development in 1991, Agenda 21, and then the Nigerian policy on the environment is the first adoption in Africa, and that's at least we have taken a bold step. The question would be, we have a policy, we have an act. How have we using it? How are we monitoring? And all of that. So that's what we need to look at. Responsibility. Governments traditionally took responsibility for disposing of end-life products. It was first proposed in a report to the Swedish Ministry of Environment in 1980. And now we're making manufacturers responsible from the initial point where governments were taking care of a product, the end of life product. So for the entire life cycle of the product, and especially for the take back, recycling, and final disposal of the product, it forces manufacturers to take better decisions because they have more responsibility now. Design, manufacturing, and packaging to increase recyclability and reduce disposal costs of their products. There are four facets or areas you would look at for extended producer responsibility. You have a liability for proven environmental damage caused by your product. You have the responsibility to handle the cost of collection, disposal, or recycling of your products. You have fiscal responsibility for handling products at the end of life. And you have responsibility for informing on potential environmental impacts of your product. It has now been shifted to the manufacturer to look at the extended product or producer responsibilities. A lot of countries have begun adopting these extended producer responsibilities. Many EU countries, yes, the UK. So you can see even within the UK, a lot of companies have accepted it. So what the companies have done is they'll operate it through a third party. So if you have similar companies producing the same thing, they get a third party company to handle the extended producer responsibility. In the UK, we still have locally run collection sites for products. Some African countries are exploring this with South Africa, Kenya having implementation. I think some of our environmental sustainability students were in Ghana last year on exchange. And it was very interesting to see the model being adopted in Accra for waste collection that is different. And they were exposed to that experience. So hopefully, this project also provides for students to see what happens in other part of the world, see what we can do differently. In terms of limitations, it's very difficult to identify polluters. There is no evidence to bring it. Polluters must be identified. You need to establish that there's a link between the polluter and damage. If you watch lots of movies, you realize when it comes to these issues, it's very difficult to pin a polluter in a court for things like this. Even down to tomorrow, you would hear that smoking causes cancer, but how many people who have died of lung cancer have successfully been able to for cause of it's very difficult to establish a link between the polluter and damage, except where it's very obvious. The damage is tangible and can be quantified. You need courts to enforce liability. Those are some of the limitations of that. And then liability cannot be established where the pollution is from different people. The level of cleanup required. Restore damaged area to pristine solution. Restore damaged area sufficient to allow altered land use, residential housing, and restore damage to allow to unchanged land use. If we look at the Ogoni UNEP reports, it's a couple of years now, and nothing has been happening. Unfortunately, from the reports we've had, Shell has paid a huge amount of money to government. But even with the payments, the government hasn't done anything. It's falling into the hands of some individuals. So in terms of the precautionary principle, that is how it's looking at regulation that is preventive. So you look at what is the severity of the outcome. Is it mild? Is it low? Is it high? And you bring in regulation, the probability of occurring as well. So you have two aspects. What is the risk of it occurring and how probable will it happen? So regulation is a preventive action of government, appropriate when the risk of a negative event is known. What about when the risk is not known? So it involves lots of data, it involves lots of more information. What if there's uncertainty over either the severity or likelihood? The precautionary principle used. The definition comes from Comments 2 and 5. When human activity morally unacceptable harm that is scientifically plausible but uncertain, actions should be taken to avoid or diminish of that harm. So the whole idea should be, if this activity is going to cause a harm that is possible scientifically, then you need to take actions to avoid that harm. And harm can be one of the following: either threat to human life or health, serious and effectively irreversible, inequitable to present future generations, and imposed without adequate consideration of the human rights of those affected. The precautionary principle: the past products made or sold and actions taken that impact the environment with no requirement to prove safety. Where those affected are able to prove problems, regulations are introduced. The burden on proof is on those who are affected. So you who are affected would need to say, yeah, because this particular product was involved, you are the one that has to prove that. Then the avoidance of economic constraints is also a priority. Today, currently, the producer or polluter that has to prove that his products are safe. So right now, it is your own responsibility to say, okay, I am sure that whatever I have produced is not giving, it's not having a harmful impact on people. If impacts could be proven not to be, if impacts could not be proven to a degree of certainty, producers could legally challenge. So in the past, when government wanted to regulate, it was hard to prove risk. But nowadays, it's a lot easier. But again, the producer can regularly challenge if you cannot prove to a certainty that your product you have made has an effect on the environment. Today, the precautionary principle reduces the burden of proof. Yes, government still has to prove, but only has to show that harm is possible, even if there is no certainty. And so the onus is on the producer to make sure that whatever produce or products they are making, there is absolutely no harm involved. In terms of the history of this policy use, it was first proposed in Germany in 1970 during the preparation of legislation on air pollution. And in Germany, it was called the foresight principle, looking into the future. What is the most likely to happen? So what sort of precautions can we take? And it was included in the UN Declaration on Environment and Development in 1992. It has become widely accepted. And it's called the 1992 Maastricht Treaty. In order to protect the environment, a precautionary approach shall be widely applied by states. In these states, we are talking of nations, according to their capability. Where there are threats of serious or irreversible damage, lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation. What the principle is saying here is, yes, I think that whatever you are producing might have an effect on either the present or the future. We don't have to say, well, you have not proven scientifically beyond any reasonable doubt that this will happen. It will be taken that cost-effective measures to prevent that degradation would happen. So it has become a full-fledged general principle of international law. There are several arguments for and against the precautionary approach. Generally means you are postponing the implementation of an action. That's one of the arguments. And the point they are making is, if you don't have the full scientific evidence that whatever I am producing is causing environmental degradation, and you are stopping me from doing that, it means you are stifling innovation and development. So if people have ideas, they think, oh yeah, this idea should be able to make this company grow, make the society grow. You are stopping them because you are thinking, not with full scientific knowledge. So that's one of the arguments against it. The second argument is that the use of people may be motivated by unscientific, irrational concerns. It aims for an unobtainable zero risk. It's very difficult to say this thing has no risks at all of occurring. Excess caution leads to paralysis and stagnation because you are so cautious of what might happen out, might not even happen. It makes a lot of people paralyzed. It still comes down to stifling innovation and development. Arguments for the precautionary approach is postponement may allow new scientific knowledge and advances that solves a problem more efficiently or cheaply. So we're not rushing into that. So let's look at other options. It also avoids passing on environmental problems to future generations to solve. So we are more on the cautionary aspect of this implementation. And damage caused by an action may be irreversible. So if I say this product might cause a harm that might not be reversible, why take the risk, even though I don't have the full scientific facts? It makes use of available scientific evidence, and it does not require outright ban on products. Now, in all of this, we'll have different ideas on how the principles we need to do. What is the role of the politician? Because at the end of the day, that is not what determines pollution. It's the politicians. The level of protection required, the level of acceptable environmental damage, the level of risks that is acceptable, whether level of uncertainty requires use of PP. The most important thing is that we need to consult widely, both with the producer, the consumers, the government, and other stakeholders. And politicians end up making the final decision, either in parliament with laws enacted. Again, the level of protection with countries is an individual decision. In terms of uncertainty, we have pragmatic uncertainty. We don't have data in this case because you haven't done an insufficient study. You are not sure of the quality of the data you have. You have doubts about even the relevance of the data to the particular issue. That is described as you are being pragmatic in terms of the uncertainties you have. For theoretical uncertainty, it arises from newness of discipline. So again, that is where we have issues with different schools of thought on pollution. Some people will tell you environmental degradation, climate change is a hoax, because we interpret data differently, or we interpret the scientific methodology that was used differently. That's why we have ranges to say, oh, this is what is acceptable, this is not is acceptable. There's a lack of knowledge about causal connections. There are many things we don't know in terms of what causes this. If we talk of climate change now, there are several factors we can bring in. So which one is more predominant in terms of predicting effect on environment? And there's a lot of complexity in open systems. The environment is huge and it requires so many competitions, so much information, that the sheer scale of this whole thing is complex. And complexity is a very difficult thing to deal with at any level. We remember what happened in COVID. That was a very complex situation. There are lots of guessworks. And at that point, you need to decide, okay, how do I really handle the complexity in this system? Natural systems are very unpredictable. Today, there's rain. Tomorrow, what exactly is causing this? Those are very difficult things to handle in terms of uncertainty. Intangible damage, lack of data, or is difficult to quantify. When we say, okay, we're studying effect of heavy metals, we're affecting its effect on maybe heavy metals on plants and animals. We don't have enough data, or it's difficult to quantify exactly how these things have an effect. But again, harm may not be self-evident because signs are usually within normal bounds of variation. First effects might not be recognized as being harmful. Later on, you could see harm. So basically, you could have something in your system, and maybe in the next 20, 30 years, that's when you will see the effect because of the complexity of even the species. In human beings, you can have a particular metal in your system. Perhaps your body would react to it well now, but the next 5, 10 years, you don't know how it will affect you. So there may be a long time difference between changes and harmful circumstances or consequences. Harm can also be attributed to a number of causes. So it makes quantifying these things uncertain. And so environmentalists need to use uncertainty to press for protections. Industry will always resist it. So what would the policymaker, the politician do? The best thing at the end of the day is to weigh the economic effects of the new products and action against the harm that might be done. A typical example I can think of now, if we find out maybe there's something we are doing what we have produced, and this particular produce might, because we are still dealing with uncertainty, might have an effect. There are no full studies here to show that this is the effect this product or this action would have in the next 20 years, what will the policymaker do? If he feels he has just 4 years in government or maybe 10 years in government, what decision does he take in terms of the economic benefits of what that action or product may be, as against the harm that it might have on the environment? Again, it doesn't often have the luxury of delaying until better evidence becomes available. That's what the policymaker has in terms of, for our democracy, we have a maximum of maybe 4 years as governor, another 4 years. So what happens? It can't wait till there's better evidence to show that this new product is not harmful to the environment. How much of evidence would he need to implement the precautionary principle? Complete ignorance is full scientific uncertainty. If decisions were to be taken on the basis of irrational fears and speculation, then no scientific evidence will be required at all. So at the end of the day, the decision has to be taken on some level of uncertainty, not because we just have fear or we speculate that this would be bad. In terms of levels of data required to implement this, we have both qualitative and quantitative. The qualitative definition is reasonable grounds for concern, reasonable scientific plausibility. Plausibility is it plausible? Is it possible this will happen? What is the scientific credibility? You've seen the way Trump has approached the environment. He is saying, look, if facts do not show that this is going to happen, I might as well not take this seriously. All I want is to develop America. I don't care. You must show that this happens. And the reality with data is that data is interpreted in the way you want to interpret it. You bring a scientific data today, some scientists might choose to interpret it in different ways. In this case, we're talking of reasonable scientific plausibility and scientific credibility. If an organization is funded by the Green Party, they are more likely to be influenced by, their results will be influenced by those who are funded. So those are some of the issues people have in terms of when results coming from scientists, the question would be, what is the scientist benefiting for giving me this data? And we had that even during COVID, when there were doubts that, if this has just happened, why do we have vaccines ready? So there will always be those information, but at the end of the day, some of it is qualitative. A scientist, David Resnick, suggests that the hypothesis that harm results must be consistent with existing knowledge and theories. So what have we known so far in terms of literature survey? So that is important. There has to be some sort of coherence or agreement. The hypothesis must explain some important observations. In terms of analogy, the hypothesis possesses causal mechanisms. So if this happens, this is expected to happen. Precedents, events predicted should be similar to previous observations. That also has to do with, has it happened before? The hypothesis should also be reasonably precise. Again, the emphasis there is on reasonable. It must also be straightforward and not complex. It should eliminate ignorance, but not uncertainty. The Rio Declaration is the lack of full scientific certainty should not be used as the lack of scientific certainty should not be used as a reason for any cost-effective measure to prevent environmental pollution. Policymakers could take the risk of damage. Policymakers, you look at that and say, okay, maybe economic reasons like risk, because this is what I want to happen within the short. To be ultimate reasons for inactions, like
It's as if network kicked you out again. We can't hear you.
okay, yeah, sorry, I just got back in and I'm waiting for. Just give me a second. Let's connect the laptop. So just give me a second. So, uh, so we're saying uh, there might be legitimate reasons why a politician would decide that, okay, uh, uh, we're measuring costs more than costs of remediation. The economic benefits will be lost an action taken. So it's the principle statement specify take the distribution so that everyone is into the standard of living, an acceptable standard of living and quality of living. It's not equality. It's valid for, which is some. And so for equity principle, the reasons must be just, fair, and impartial. So there are basically five pillars of equity. One, people's rights must be respected. People should get what they deserve. People's needs should be met. Distribution of rewards or burden should not be disproportionate to efforts, choices, and abilities. And it limits to burdens placed on individuals. When we talk of environmental equity, we're talking of a minimum income and environmental quality below which nobody falls. So we're looking at the entire society and say, okay, in terms of our people, they should have minimum income. There is a minimum quality we expect from our people so that everybody, it is fair to everybody. And at the national level, at the subnational level, you would be able to sit down and decide. So, for example, if an industry or and in I would on the line if the yeah, sorry again. I was thrown out again. Let's see, just another 5 minutes or so, and we'll take the rest of the day up. And so people have to be treated in the same way, or whatever actions we take that is meant to bring. It shouldn't be an action that would now still cause a lower environmental quality to such people. And I was giving a typical example. There are lots of road construction in Makurdi at the moment. It's a good thing that we should have roads. What happens to all the dust for people who don't have cars with AC? How are they treated by the fact, even though we are talking improvement? So those are the sort of things we need to take into consideration. It's an essential, so environmental equity is basically an essential element of sustainable development. The development must meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That is the definition by the World Commission on Economic Development in 1919. Intergenerational equity. there has to be a fair distribution of resources between countries and across communities within them. An illustration of inequity is proximity to environmental problems. And it gives an example in terms of noise, because we have industries, we have people, we have cars, we have a lack of green open space. And within city, you can also have the industrialized areas, you can have airport flight paths, you can have busy roads and inner city areas. In a place like London, if you are driving in central London, you pay a higher tax as you just drive. So if you book an Uber, for example, and you are going into central London, that Uber, for the pollution you are going to cause in that densely populated area, they impose a tax or a levy on you. So that, because, of course, because you have more pollution from driving or whatever economic activity you are engaged in, there is a need for more control of substances there. So that's the whole trying to bring some sort of equity, so that those that are prone to those industrialized areas don't get that, have some sort of equality between those that are not staying in places. Poverty, income inequality is a bigger issue. And increasing wealth means greater choice about where you live. The poor man must stay in the slums. He doesn't have a choice. But the wealthy man can choose to stay anywhere. And so where is the equality in that? Those are the things that, so if there's supposed to be development and it affects everybody, we need to find a way to bring some sort of equality to that situation. There is more capacity to resist imposition of polluting developments. If you want to construct a road in a place like BGC, the community that are wealthy can say, no, we don't want that because it will affect us. And that's what poverty does. It is common to all countries, like I say, but it's worse with greater wealth disparity. So in developed worlds, we can have those choices, but where you are really poor, you don't even have the information. So who do you fight? So that's what poverty can do. Another source of inequality is health vulnerability to pollution. Again, we have age, we have gender, we have income, we have health condition. So those who have health that is failing, you are more likely to be affected by damages to the environment. The most vulnerable groups are often the poorest, the elderly, the frail, the disabled, who live closest to pollution, and they don't have much of a say in what happens. And so environmental legislation can cause inequity. The standards are based on what will be safe for average health status, living normal lifestyle. For example, a fishing community consuming higher levels of heavy metals because they are just a poor community living around the river. So they are more likely to have this sort of effects on them. And these are all the things that bring the inequality we find in society. Occupation, that's another source of inequity. Industries expose workers to different levels of contamination, environmental risk, mining, mineral processing, the chemical industry. There is a high proportion of high exposure workers who are migrants. If you migrate to a different country, are more likely to take jobs that most of the citizens of that country would not take, and definitely that brings about inequality. And it is seen disproportionately in developing countries. That's the reason why we have this specific project, because we have most of these factors, high poverty rates, we need to develop. So we really don't care much about environmental protection health and safety standards are lower compared to other countries. I give an example of the kind of cars we use in developed countries and the kind of cars where all the environmental precautions are taken. What are the factors that what are the things, the emission rates of the vehicles we use? So at the end of the day, we are looking at us being, it is making a lot of Western corporations move to developing countries because they know that we have weaker laws. We don't protect our staff. We don't protect our citizens. And it will cost them more to produce in those countries. That has happened in the Western world a lot. When many of these designers you see now, Nike and all of that, if you look at the labels, you see that they are made in Indonesia, they are made in the Philippines, because the actual cost of producing these things in the developed world, in terms of even income inequality and all of that, is taken into consideration, and because of that, they are now moving into the third world or the lower income countries to produce. Race is another source of inequality. Pollution is heaviest in the poorest neighborhood where immigrants and disadvantaged racial groups live. In terms of debates, the question is, are ethnic groups being deliberately discriminated against, or is this a reflection of being relatively poorer? Look at the amount of dumping of hazardous waste in native Indian reservations in North America. Environmental protection laws are weaker than in other areas. And then firms with waste disposal problems, they offer millions to indigenous governments and also to secure disposal rights. So they come and pay you and say, can I use your environment for disposing my waste? Without you knowing that, okay, that is going to have an effect on you. I think we'll stop this class for today. We'll continue tomorrow afternoon. I don't know how much time I have, but Professor Shato will continue his section of this course by tomorrow, and I would see how I can conclude by tomorrow afternoon. But I hope that we can still have another engagement. By the end of this course, I would give you some areas of concentration. However, I hope that we can have some sort of just discussions on your understanding on what this is about, what areas. But my take home from this course, like I mentioned earlier, is let's have the information. Let's be very critical of the information we have, and let's take decisions that we think are best for our people wherever we are. You might be in a place to advise government, advise a politician, or play a role in having maybe working in an organization that brings awareness to people. If we are not equipped with the information, we wouldn't know what is the right information to pass. But we should, as much as possible, make it a point of duty to play our own small role in how we think we can have an environment. And when the bigger decisions come, we use whatever information we have from these courses to take informed decisions that are beneficial for our people. I will send this material after this class immediately, and then tomorrow we can see how we can conclude on this. So I'm open
Thank
to
you,
further
sir.
discussions after the class. I'll share my email with you on the platform. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your wonderful.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much for
Thank you,
today.
sir. Thank you for today.
Bye, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.